Hello, and welcome to the My Heart and Mind podcast, where it's all about creating the feel-good mindset so you can make the most of every moment and reap the benefits of getting the most happiness out of life. And now, over to your host, Sally Crawley.
Hello and welcome to episode 16 of the My Heart and Mind podcast. Today is the first of my episodes that include a specialist in the cardiac field. And this week I'm going to be interviewing Angela Hartley. Angela is an experienced coach and cardiac nurse with over 7 years of experience. Quite a unique combination of skills. We chat about how in the UK cardiac rehab is provided for most patients via the NHS and how important it is to have proper instructions for the well-being of our hearts during the healing process and how to achieve it. She explains to us why cardiac rehab is different to just going out for a run and going down the gym and how to make the best out of doing exercise at home. We also discuss how you know if you're doing too much or too little. Angela shares some important do's and some don'ts, and we talk about the beliefs that we might hold about our bodies and how it can be possible for certain people to get back to high-intensity exercise. And we also discuss how medications that we take to protect our heart can have an impact on our ability to exercise and why it's important that we take the meds and do the work. So welcome, Angela. Thank you very much for coming on the show with me today. Would you like to tell our listeners who you are and anything that you'd like to about yourself?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited. I absolutely love doing podcasts. I think this is only my third one, so I'm still a beginner. But my name is Angela. I am a cardiac nurse by trade, I guess you could call it. But in the last 7 years, I've been specialising in cardiac rehab. So I'm an exercise coach and a cardiac nurse. So it's quite a unique combination of skills. And although I started out doing a lot of hospital work for the first half of my nursing career, as soon as I entered into the world of cardiac rehab, I absolutely loved it and I haven't left since. And I recently, well, not recently, it's probably been 5 years since my son was born, really. I've been doing it by myself. So I've got my own company called Hartley, and I do private cardiac rehab, and I do a lot of Zoom classes for cardiac rehab, and it's a lot of fun, and I absolutely love the heart. So I'm all about the heart, and I'm really happy to talk about it for hours and hours. So thank you for having me.
Oh, brilliant. You're welcome. So what is it about the heart and cardiac rehab that really ticks your boxes for you?
Well, if I take it back to the very beginning when I was a student nurse, I obviously had to do lots of placements, and I did lots of wards, and I did emergency medicine, and I did mental health, and I did community, and I did orthopedics and gastro stuff. And heart patients tended to go home quicker and better and in better health. And I absolutely love that people get better and they leave. And obviously, as a nurse, you sort of never really see them again after you send them home from the ward. So what I really didn't appreciate at the time was that when people go home, even though I'm like, oh, I've sent them home, they must be absolutely fine now. When they got home, they had all these other troubles that there wasn't really that support and help for them, which is why I then really liked cardiac rehab, because I got to see them after and really got to learn about their everyday life. So I love the heart. It's obviously the most important muscle in the body. It works the hardest, and it's just so resilient. And I just love that. It just keeps going no matter what we do to it, and no matter what hits you, it can be really, really strong and keep going.
You also work with people over the mindset of exercise as well. Do you find that that's a key part of the rehabilitation?
Yeah, definitely. So especially if you've had a major event out of the blue, if you were previously well, I think that is such a scary thing for people. And yeah, I was putting my nurse hat back on from the ward days. We sort of were so blasé about it, like, oh yeah, you've had a heart attack, you've had a stent, yeah, we've fixed you up. Okay, see you soon, here's a bag of pills. Whereas that didn't really cover it in terms of the mental side of things. The how do I get back up tomorrow morning and go back to living my everyday life? And for me, I realized that after a couple of years of the cardiac rehab, that it was all very good me giving them what exercise to do, but it was really the confidence to do it and the mindset around why they were doing it, how important it was, and how good you can feel if you do exercise. I realized that actually that was probably the number one most important thing to focus on before the little details of what exercise to do.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that I thought was quite curious is, we in the UK, we have cardio rehab that's provided for most patients under the NHS, but in America they don't seem to, and I'm sure in other countries as well. What is it about the exercises in a cardiac rehab environment that is different to somebody coming home and just going down the gym or just going out for a run? What is it that you specifically teach?
So the real number one thing that is the most important thing that it's called the BACPR, the British Association of Cardiac Prevention and Rehabilitation, is the warm-up. And most gym classes, most DVDs, most fitness programs don't really focus enough on the warm-up. And when you've had any heart intervention or you have any damage to the heart, or it's not functioning optimally, or you're on medication, that's the real key, is to do that prolonged warm-up, to warm up the heart, to open up the arteries, to get more blood and oxygen to that heart muscle, to keep it happy throughout the exercise. So I'd say that would be the number one thing. And the other thing is the exercises really focus on keeping the blood flowing around the body, avoiding things that can increase blood pressure so that we're keeping the heart nice and happy. So avoiding things like power lifting, working to your max intensity, really heavy weights. So things that are probably common sense, but actually, if you were doing that sort of stuff before and you went straight back into it, it's probably not the best idea.
So one of the questions that came up in one of the groups where I asked them was about, how do you know what is enough, what is too much and what is too little when you're doing cardio exercise?
So if you go by the current UK guidelines, which is 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week, that should be enough. That should be where you feel a little bit breathless, a little bit warm, a little bit glowy, bit of sweat on the forehead, where it feels like exercise. It might take a while to build up to that sort of intensity. So I wouldn't expect someone to be able to do that the first few weeks that they're after their heart surgery or after a heart attack or after any intervention. So that's one sort of way, is going by how you feel. Do I feel like I'm exercising? So we want it sort of in the middle range. I would say if you have ever done a cardiac rehab, you may remember the RPE scale. So it's the rate of perceived exertion. And they hold it up in front of you with a piece of paper and say, "What number are you?"
Yeah,
and you go,
I remember.
I don't know. And the one that they want you to be at is called somewhat hard. Okay, so somewhat hard is the same sort of thing as moderate. It's not too easy, it's not too hard. So if we imagine we're sitting here talking right now, we're probably, resting, we're feeling fairly okay, we're comfortable, right? We walk around the room. For us, because we might be okay with that, it feels easy. We walk a bit faster down the street, it feels okay. We walk up a slight hill, it feels moderately easy, depending on your fitness. So everyone's going to have a different level where they hit that intensity. Once you get up towards the, gosh, this is really hard, I can't talk to you because I can't quite catch my breath, then that's intense exercise. And first of all, we want to avoid that until you're fit enough to handle that and make sure that's safe for you. So, certain people have been told don't ever exercise to a high intensity. So I guess that doesn't really answer the question, but in terms of how do you know whether it's hard enough, is I would say I want you to be able to continue this for at least 15 to 30 minutes, depending on your fitness, without discomfort.
Okay, that makes sense.
So if you could do it for 4 hours, it's probably too easy. If you can stand and march on the spot for a long time, it's too easy. If you can walk quite briskly around the block 500 times, it's probably too easy. If you're going up a hill and you're running up a hill and you can only do it for 10 seconds, it's too hard. So you need to be able to do it for that sort of 30-minute mark. And it might take you several weeks to build up towards that 30-minute mark. But that's the kind of gold standard of how long you should be exercising for at least.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And I do remember those charts, but I could just never remember what each number and that meant. And that, I'm not sure, definitely sprung to mind. But I think that happens quite a lot with recovery after a cardiac event in any way, because it's like that moderation thing, isn't it? How do we know what moderation is when it comes to food and exercise and reasonableness? Because it is different for everybody. There is no, that's the mark and that's where you draw the line.
Yeah, exactly.
You must get to hear loads of myths that there are around exercising or not exercising after a heart event, cardiac diagnosis. What are the most common ones that you hear?
Well, I don't know if it's a myth more than perhaps a fear, but the biggest thing that people say is, am I going to drop dead? And although I can't guarantee this with 100% accuracy, with 99.99% accuracy, the answer is no, because you're the safest person in the room. You've had your intervention, you're on the medication, you're working at a low intensity because we're building things up gradually. You've been not fixed, it's not quite the right word, but you're the safest person in the gym compared to the guy next to you who hasn't exercised for 50 years, has high blood pressure, has had a smoke before he's come into the gym, has a really stressful job, goes, I need to lose weight, starts sprinting on the treadmill as fast as he can. He's way more likely to have a heart attack than you after your heart attack, who's been treated, he's working out sensibly, he's doing the right things, you've probably changed your diet, you're no longer smoking, you've reduced your stress, you're taking the medication. So I'd say that's probably the biggest one, is that fear of dropping dead during exercise, which I think is a valid fear. Like it's super scary. It's your heart, right? But it's very, very unlikely. A study of 1 million cardiac rehab hours had absolutely 0 deaths. They did have 3 events, but no one died. So obviously that's great. So that's a lot of people to study, and they were all cardiac patients. In terms of like other myths, it's difficult to, everyone's got different opinions on diet, and diet rules change all the time. So I try and just stick with the same moderation rule for everyone and adapt it to what their preferences are. So I follow a lower carbohydrate Mediterranean style diet, because that is the only diet really that has some evidence behind it to show that it's beneficial for the heart and preventing heart attacks.
So one of the things that we have had in the UK, and I'm sure in other countries, is that we've not been able to get face-to-face with our cardiac rehab. And then in the UK, my dad had a heart attack in 2020. And it was quite difficult for him, whereas I got to go to the lovely Papworth Hospital, and I felt comfortable and safe and secure, and every measurement was taken from me. My dad didn't. But he was provided some CDs which helped him with what exercises to do and some relaxation and things like that. Have you got any tips that you've been giving to people that have been in lockdown or haven't got to cardiac rehab as quickly as we might usually have?
Well, it's getting started with the walking, which is usually what they tell you to do after discharge. So as soon as you leave hospital, start to rebuild up the walking. Obviously, if you weren't able to walk because of injuries or knees or pain or anything like that, it would be finding something equivalent, like maybe a stationary bike or some seated exercises. The British Heart Foundation has lots of YouTube videos that you can follow, which are aimed at cardiac rehab. In the first lockdown, I did 3 days a week. They're probably the same DVDs, but they're on YouTube now. In the first lockdown, I did 3 days a week on Facebook of live cardiac rehab classes. So there are people out there doing it where you can follow along. I now do my Zoom classes, which people are welcome to come along and try for free. And, so I do 4 days a week of Zoom cardiac rehab. So there is things out there that are available. There's options on YouTube for free. You can call the British Heart Foundation and they could possibly send you that package of DVDs if you didn't receive it. In the US, again, there's the same YouTube. Finding someone like me who's out there, I know we're a rare bunch. But I think it's starting that initial part of the rehab process, which is you realizing that exercise is okay. And there's pros and cons to everything, but one of the cons that I feel to the face-to-face rehab is you're in a safety bubble of cotton wool and ECG monitors and someone taking your blood pressure and going, oh, are you working too hard? Slow down. And so you go home and you're like, oh, I don't really know what to do now because she told me to go fast and she told me to go slow and they had a monitor on me. What were they monitoring? Were they monitoring my heart rate, my P waves, so then you get more worried about exercising by yourself. Whereas I think what you need to do is just get started with something that feels good and slowly build it up and realize that actually that is generally the safest thing to do.
I think one of the pros for a Zoom online thing is you can actually fit it in around your day. You're not governed by those set times as well, which is quite helpful if you've got a busy life. Not that anyone's been busy recently, but I think it's good. The world has probably going to get the mix of doing a bit of both face to face, because I have to say so I did a 12-week course. The first 3 weeks that I went, I really needed that reassurance. I was, okay, long story short, I had my leg in a plaster cast at the time when I had my heart attack. So I was particularly nervous. But I think that going on from that, I could have done a lot more at home if there had been things. And there wasn't that many Facebook groups around for me when I first had my heart attack. I joined the British Hearties, which I thought was absolutely saved my life, not physically, but mentally and emotionally. But you run a Facebook group, don't you?
Yes, so my group's called Healthy Hearties. So similar to the British Hearties, really, with less banter about what's that group that Jeff loves? Dollar.
Oh gosh, yes.
less chat about dollar and more chat about heart and exercise. But no, I mean, I think with all of these groups, they're amazing because I think you just want to normalize everything. Like, hey, is anyone else's shoulders sore after heart attack? And you're like, yeah, what's with the sore shoulders? And then it feels more normal when you're not alone. And I think sometimes the face-to-face stuff is amazing because you go, oh, well, I'm not the worst in the room. So you do feel a bit better, which is a bad thing to say. But I think looking around the room, you go, oh, well, John over there's had his open heart surgery and he looks all right. So I'll give it a try, So, I think that is one of the big downfalls about not having the face-to-face rehab. Yeah. Some of them are reopening. Some of them will stay on Zoom. I've got a good bunch now on Zoom, and a lot of them have said, actually, we're just going to keep doing it. It's just their normal routine now.
yeah. It fits in with different people. I'm a trustee of a cancer charity, and we've obviously moved doing a lot of things online. And one of the things we found is that people that couldn't get to face for whatever reason it was, actually have been able to join the Zoom. So, you know, different strokes for different folks, which is what I always say. So one thing that has that I think is quite interesting is, are there any specific do's or don'ts that you would tell people when they're thinking about exercising if they're not on a cardio rehab program?
So I guess I'm going to say, doctor always says, is do what feels right, which is really annoying because it's not very specific. But in terms of that RPE scale, that working out at a level that feels comfortable, that is a big do. So do try some exercise. Do include a warm-up of at least 15 minutes where you're starting out like a tortoise, and you're walking super slow, you're building it up, you're warming up your muscles, you're building up the heart rate really gently and treating your body like a car engine. And you wouldn't go from first to fifth in 3 seconds. You'd go, cruising in first, then you go into second for a bit, and then you're in the 20 mile an hour zone for a while in gear 3. And then you're sitting at, gear 4 for a while because you're not on the motorway. That's where I want you to sort of think of it, that analogy, is building it up really slowly, holding that level and adding a few minutes each week. So the first week you might only be able to do a warm-up, and then you do a little cool down and you stretch, and that's it. The next week you might be able to do 5 minutes holding that pace. The other do's is do be able to talk. So can you hold a conversation if someone was next to you, like me, going, how are you feeling? You should be able to talk back to me. So you're not getting to that point where you're so breathless that you can't talk. If you are super breathless because you've got COPD or you've got heart failure, which can make people feel very breathless, atrial fibrillation can, or you're just very unconditioned or unfit, then go slower. Go at a slower pace that you can hold, which may feel counterproductive. You go, I can't go any slower. I say, I want you to go slower because I want you to go for longer. And then eventually those adaptations happen, and then you slowly start to build up the speed. Some big don'ts. Don't do anything that hurts, which is obviously sounds like common sense, but you'd be surprised that people like to thrash themselves. They feel like no pain, no gain. That's the old gym mentality. This is different. I want you to build your aerobic base fitness. I don't need you to run a marathon. I don't need you to lift something super heavy. I need you to be fit and your heart to get enough oxygen. So you don't need to be the strongest or fastest person at the moment. So the caveat is, at the moment, we can build back up fitness and you can start to run again if that's the goal and that's what is safe for you according to what's happened. I'm training a guy at the moment who's 72, and his goal after bypass surgery is to do a half Ironman.
Oh, wow.
Like, amazing, right? But he was doing that before and realized my training's gone a bit downhill. What's going on? Had something wrong with his heart, has now had bypass surgery, and is now feeling great. He's already doing an hour on the bike. He's in the swimming pool, brilliant. But that's his goal. So, we're safe to do that. So it is possible for certain people to get back to that higher intensity. But for most people, start slow, start low, add minutes rather than speed. And the other don't is don't hold your breath for any reason, and don't work to the point of fatigue. So that is a tricky one. So again, using the car analogy, if your tank and you will be able to relate to this, if your tank when you wake up in the morning is already half empty because you're exhausted from what's happened to you, then you don't want to suddenly work super hard and do tons of exercise and not be able to shower yourself later that day. We need to, balance your energy out. So do 2 minutes of exercise, make sure you can shower, make sure you can eat your breakfast, make sure you can do everything else. and then go, well, okay, I've got a little bit of energy left. I could probably do 5 minutes tomorrow, and start to budget your energy. And as your energy increases, hopefully through good nutrition, better sleep, recovery time as the weeks go on, then you can start to do more rather than draining the tank and ending up with no energy.
It sounds to me that what you're saying is actually really listen to your body. Don't be guided
Exactly.
Don't listen to what everybody else is doing or what people think that they should be doing. Listen to what your body says and adjust according to that, but always have in mind that just pushing yourself just a little bit if you've got space to do it.
That's a good way, yeah. If you've got the space, push a little more. If you don't, bring it back, tone things down. Yeah, definitely. That's a really good way of putting it.
Excellent. So I, like many other people, are on a load of medications, and they all have different effects. So I particularly asked this question because I was fascinated by the fact that I have an incredible difficulty in losing weight. Straight after my event, I lost it. It just fell off me. But then once the tablets had kicked in and I'd got back to having my taste for food back, etc. And you did a video about how beta blockers can actually slow down your metabolism. Can you tell people that are listening a little bit about that and the other effects of the drugs that have it on exercise and weight gain?
So beta blocker is probably the main culprit for side effects in terms of exercise and weight gain. So the whole purpose of a beta blocker is to reduce the heart rate and the contraction. So it slows the contraction of the heart, so it allows more time for the blood and oxygen to get to the heart muscle. So it serves a really important purpose. It's often given for a year after heart attack to prevent any arrhythmias, prevent a second heart attack, and just to give that heart that nice resting time. It lowers blood pressure, it lowers your heart rate, and it stops you being able to exercise at a higher heart rate. So I always describe it in terms of exercise like wearing a rubber band around your middle and someone sort of yanking on it, holding you back a bit because you're like, oh, I really want to go for a run. And they're going, nope, you're not going to be able to do that. So your legs get tired quicker, you puff a bit more. You're like, I used to be able to hit 130 beats a minute jogging to the end of the street, and now I can hardly hit 110. And that's the job of the beta blocker. So we almost have to work at, again, that slower intensity, slow things down and rebuild back up towards doing more at a lower heart rate. In terms of weight gain, because your heart rate is then lower, you're burning less calories just sitting around, which is very depressing. And then again, when you're exercising, you're burning less calories because your heart rate's not as high. So one of the main ways of your metabolism working and the amount of calories you burn simply staying alive is how high is your heart rate, which is why people who are super highly stressed, highly anxious, if their thyroid's up a bit, their heart rate might be up a bit, they can often lose lots of weight because everything's up. They produce a lot of heat. That is also burning calories, trying to get rid of heat. So all of that function burns calories just by doing nothing without that added exercise. So by lowering all of that, you're burning less calories simply staying alive. Therefore, if you don't eat less and try and do more activity throughout the day and, get things moving, wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, be a person that sort of jiggles around all day, then you are going to burn less calories and you're going to put on weight simply through that less metabolism.
But it is overcomeable or fathom-outable, as I like to say to my daughter. It's just that you have to do a little bit more or cut down a little bit more on the calorie intake, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and not everyone has a huge impact. It obviously depends on other things. And I do find that women in particular tend to have the thyroid hormone seems to change, and whether it's related at the exact same time or whether it's completely separate is still, out for debate. But because around the menopause, everything's changing, estrogen drop, that protects the heart. So that's when the risk of heart disease goes up. That's when the thyroid hormones start to drop off. So all of this is happening all at once, which means metabolism's lower, weight gain goes on, heart attack happens, new medication. So all this stuff at once, like it's a bit of a minefield, which is like, hang on, 10 years ago it was perfectly fine. And now all this is happening. So you just have to sort of unpick it bit by bit and say, right, is my thyroid being tested? Because the medication can also affect that. Is this the best dose for me to be on? Do I need to be on this dose of beta blocker? Am I eating really well? Am I drinking, well? Am I not drinking too much and all of that?
Right, okay. I mean, that's really interesting because I have struggled with it. And menopausal. I was on HRT before I had my heart attack. They then took that away. And so everything kind of went back to normal. So I got a bit of a double whammy, I think. Yeah. You mentioned about burning heat. Since my heart attack, I tend to be more cold than I am warm. Is that a side effect from some of the drugs that we take?
Yeah, so again, the burning, the feeling hotter would be someone who had like a higher metabolism,
right?
Who someone was higher heart rate, higher blood pressure, the veins, the feeling the heat. If your thyroid is high, where you're producing more heat. So it's the thyroid is the one that can produce more heat. It heats up your body, you feel hot, you end up with a faster metabolism. But the beta blocker in particular, the feeling cold, because we're prioritizing the heart and it's not contracting as quickly, we're not pumping as much blood to the peripheries. So your fingers get cold, your feet get cold, and then you do feel colder as a person. I'd say the main culprit is the beta blocker for that one.
Yeah, and it does the most to protect the heart, really, I guess. So you can't have it always, as they say.
If you need it. But I would always make sure you're reviewing these things annually, because if you no longer need it, if the NICE guidelines only say for set amount of time after a heart attack or after a bypass or after an arrhythmia, and you no longer need that, then it's important to keep reviewing annually for those things at a minimum.
Angela, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, and I know we've kind of gone off a bit of the exercise and onto things like diet and the effect of drugs, etc. I'd like you to tell people about how they can get in touch with you and find out more about your group and the classes that you run, and what is it that makes them so different, because everybody out there, I'm sure, could definitely do with a bit of Angela Hartley, and your name is absolutely so appropriate, isn't it?
I know. Didn't plan that one. It's my married name, actually.
Oh.
Any social media, it's Healthy Hearties is the Facebook group, and you'll obviously be able to see me through there. Search for my name on Facebook, Angela Hartley, or on Instagram, Healthy Hearties. My website is www.healthyhearties.co.uk, so you can send me a message through there. I do a Zoom class, so it's London time, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the mornings at 9:15 or 10:15 on a Tuesday. Everyone's welcome to have a trial class, see if they like it. We're a very friendly bunch. We have a little chit chat. We've got one guy from the US, Larry. He's my absolute favorite person in the world. He gets up at 3 a.m. to do my class.
That's dedication.
So we all love him. So on a Monday when we're all whinging that it's 9 o'clock and we're tired, Larry's like, excuse me, it's 3 a.m. here. So, but he's an early bird. He goes to bed very early. So he's just worked it into his day because he couldn't find anyone like me. And I hopefully there are other people who start to do what I do. You're very welcome to come and join. It's a lot of fun. We do very similar stuff to you would do in the class. Your face-to-face class, lots of marching on the spot, heel tap, lots of movement, the side raises, the bicep curls, and you don't need any equipment. You can use water bottles to start with as your weight. You don't need anything fancy. And we'd love to see you.
Fabulous. Well, Angela, when my leg comes out of my robo boot from breaking it, I'm definitely going to come along to one of your classes, because I think I said to you
Again.
Yeah. And I try not to break anything this time, but exercise is the one thing, considering I used to love it, absolutely passionate about it. But since my heart attack, I just can't get into it. And I think it's about time I took myself to task and made a real effort.
Yeah.
So I'm going to wrap up now, but is there anything else that you'd like to share with people that are listening, or have I just about pulled every bit of detail out of your brain for today?
No, I think one of the other things is don't forget about using other people. You mentioned the Facebook groups. Ask questions, buddy up with someone, talk to your partner or your friend, find someone who really understands what you've been through. You don't always have to talk about your heart, but I think it's really important that you have someone in your life that really gets where you're coming from, because often your family either wraps you up in cotton wool or says, oh, hurry up and get on with it. That was years ago. So I think it's important that you have someone that's really on your team, whether it be a Facebook friend or someone like me, just to be there for you when you go, oh, my little finger's gone numb. Is that normal? Which is normal for certain things. But yes, that would be my only last point. But thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Yes, you're more than welcome. I'll link to everything in the show notes and in my blog post so everybody can find you easily. But Angela, thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
You've been listening to Sally Crawley and the My Heart and Mind podcast, a show for you if you've had a heart attack, cardiac event or other life-changing experience and want to feel good. It's all about mastering your feelings and emotions so you can feel great and live the life you love. To find out more, visit www.myheartandmind.co.uk and note that that's an AND and not the ampersand character. Go be magnificent.